There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when your brain decides what kind of life you're going to live. Not your circumstances, not your past, not your environment, your brain. The patterns it runs, the signals it amplifies, the habits it encodes. Winning is not something that happens out there in the world first. It is something that happens inside your nervous system. Long before anyone sees the result, your brain is not fixed. It is a dynamic, constantly rewiring system. Every thought you repeat, every action you take, every challenge you lean into or avoid is literally reshaping the architecture of your mind. This is neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to change itself based on experience. And here's the truth most people never fully grasp. Your brain is always training. The only question is whether you are training it to win or training it to quit, when you hesitate, when you avoid discomfort, when you tell yourself, I'll do it later. Your brain is learning a pattern. It is strengthening circuits associated with delay, fear, and self-doubt. But when you act despite resistance, when you move forward even when it feels hard, you are building circuits of action, resilience, and confidence. Confidence is not something you wait to feel. It is something you build through repeated evidence that you can act even when your brain tells you not to. The brain is wired to conserve energy. It prefers familiarity over growth because growth requires effort, and effort is metabolically expensive. This is why stepping into discomfort feels unnatural. It is not because you are incapable. It is because your brain is trying to protect you. But here is the shift. What if discomfort is not a signal to stop, but a signal that you are rewiring yourself? When your heart rate increases, when your focus sharpens, when you feel that internal resistance, that is your nervous system activating. That is your brain preparing to adapt. If you interpret that sensation as fear, you retreat. If you interpret it as readiness, you advance. The meaning you assign to that internal state determines whether you move forward or fall back. Winning is not about intensity in a single moment. It is about consistency over time. The brain changes through repetition, not occasional bursts of motivation. One focused effort repeated daily will rewire your brain more effectively than sporadic extreme effort. This is why small actions matter. Each repetition is a vote for the person you are becoming. There is a chemical process happening beneath your awareness. Dopamine, the molecule associated with motivation and reward, is not just released when you achieve something. It is released when you pursue something. When you set a goal and take action toward it, dopamine reinforces that behavior. But if your brain becomes dependent on external rewards, likes, validation, instant gratification, you weaken your ability to sustain effort without immediate payoff. To train your brain to win, you must learn to generate internal reward. You must find satisfaction in effort itself. This is not abstract. It is trainable. When you complete a difficult task, pause for a moment and consciously acknowledge it. That simple act strengthens the neural link between effort and reward. Over time, your brain begins to crave the process. Not just the outcome. Focus is another critical component. Your attention is a limited resource, and where you direct it shapes your brain. Every distraction you indulge weakens your ability to concentrate. Every moment of sustained focus strengthens it. Think of attention like a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it becomes. Deep work, uninterrupted effort is not just productive. It is transformative at a neural level. But training your brain to win is not just about pushing forward. It is also about recovery. Sleep is not optional. It is during sleep that your brain consolidates learning, strengthens neural connections, and clears metabolic waste. Without proper rest, your ability to focus, adapt, and perform declines. Discipline is not just about effort. It is about managing your energy so that your brain can function at its highest capacity. Your environment matters more than you think. The cues around you influence your behavior at a subconscious level. If your environment is filled with distractions, your brain will default to distraction. If your environment supports focus, your brain will align with that. This is not about willpower. It is about design. Set up your surroundings so that the desired behavior is the easiest behavior. There is also the role of identity. The brain is highly responsive to how you define yourself. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, your brain will look for evidence to confirm that belief. If you see yourself as someone who executes, who follows through, who adapts and grows, your brain will begin to align with that identity. This is not about pretending. It is about reinforcing a narrative through action. Every time you do something difficult, you are not just completing a task. You are sending a signal to your brain, this is who I am. And the brain listens. It updates its model of you based on what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally think. Failure is often misunderstood. From a neural perspective, failure is data. It is feedback that allows your brain to adjust and improve. But if you attach negative emotion to failure, if you interpret it as a reflection of your identity, you create avoidance. Your brain begins to associate effort with pain, and it will resist future attempts. The key is to separate outcome from identity. You are not your results. You are the process that generates those results. Training your brain to win requires a willingness to face discomfort repeatedly. Not once, not occasionally, but as a consistent practice. Each time you choose effort over ease, focus over distraction, discipline over impulse, you are strengthening the circuits that lead to success. There will be days when motivation is absent. This is where most people stop. But the brain does not require motivation to act. It requires a decision followed by action. Action itself generates motivation. Once you begin, your brain shifts state. The hardest part is not the work. It is the initiation. You must also understand the power of momentum. The brain builds patterns. When you stack small wins, you create a cascade of positive reinforcement. One completed task makes the next one easier to start. But the opposite is also true. One delay leads to another. Momentum works in both directions. Your job is to consciously direct it. Breathing, posture, and physiology play a role as well. Your brain is not separate from your body. The signals from your body influence your mental state. Controlled breathing can calm your nervous system or energize it. Upright posture can increase alertness. These are tools, simple, accessible tools, that allow you to shift your state when needed. The most powerful realization is this: you are not at the mercy of your brain. You are the one training it. Every habit, every thought pattern, every response to challenge is shaping your future capabilities. The brain you have tomorrow is being built by the actions you take today. There is no shortcut. There is no external factor that will replace the need for consistent effort. But there is also no limit to how much you can change. The brain is remarkably adaptable. It will meet the demands you place on it. If you demand little, it will give little. If you demand more, consistently, deliberately, it will rise to that level. You don't wait to become the kind of person who wins. You act like that person now in small, repeatable ways. You show up when it's inconvenient. You focus when it's difficult. You persist when progress is slow. And in doing so, you are not just achieving goals. You are becoming someone whose default state is to move forward, to adapt, to win, because winning is not a single event. It is a pattern. And that pattern is built in the brain, one decision at a time, one action at a time, one moment of discomfort embraced instead of avoided. The training never stops. The question is whether you are directing it or leaving it to chance. And when you begin to truly understand that, something shifts in the way you approach each day. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions, the perfect mood, the perfect timing, because you recognize that those are illusions created by a brain that is trying to conserve energy, not maximize your potential. You begin to see hesitation for what it is, a learned response that can be unlearned. The brain thrives on prediction. It is constantly trying to anticipate what will happen next based on past experiences. If your past is filled with hesitation, procrastination, or inconsistency, your brain will predict more of the same. But when you deliberately interrupt that pattern, when you take action in moments where you would normally delay, you create what is called a prediction error. And prediction errors are powerful. They are the signal the brain uses to update itself. Every time you act against your old patterns, you are telling your brain, this is no longer who I am. And the brain, over time, begins to believe it. Not because of words, but because of evidence. Evidence is the language your nervous system understands best. There is also a critical relationship between stress and performance that most people misunderstand. A certain level of stress is not harmful. It is necessary. It sharpens your focus, increases your alertness, and prepares your body for action. The problem arises when stress becomes chronic and unmanaged. The goal is not to eliminate stress, but to regulate it, to move in and out of high-performance states with control. This is where deliberate exposure becomes essential. If you consistently avoid challenging situations, your tolerance for stress decreases. But if you gradually expose yourself to difficulty, if you lean into challenges instead of away from them, you expand your capacity. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes routine. This is how growth works at a biological level. It is not sudden. It is incremental. It is the accumulation of small adaptations that over time produce significant change. Your internal dialogue plays a powerful role in this process. The words you repeat internally are not just abstract thoughts. They are signals that influence your brain's chemistry and structure. If your internal dialogue is filled with doubt, criticism, and limitation, you reinforce those states. But if your dialogue is grounded in action and possibility, focus not on empty affirmation, but on what you are doing, you begin to shift your baseline. Instead of saying, I can't do this, you train yourself to say, I'm learning how to do this. That subtle shift keeps the brain engaged rather than shutting it down. It keeps you in a state of problem solving rather than avoidance. Another key element is time perception. When you are fully engaged in a task, when your focus is undivided, time begins to compress. Hours can feel like minutes. This state, often referred to as flow, is where performance and learning are maximized. But flow is not sluchino accessed. It is triggered by specific conditions. Clear goals, immediate feedback, and a challenge level that is just beyond your current ability. To train your brain to win, you must intentionally create these conditions. You must choose tasks that stretch you without overwhelming you. You must remove distractions so your attention can fully engage. And you must commit to staying with the task long enough for your brain to transition into that state. There's also the importance of eliminating what weakens your neural discipline. Constant stimulation, endless scrolling, instant entertainment, fragmented attention conditions your brain to expect novelty at all times. This reduces your ability to tolerate boredom, and boredom is a critical gateway to deep work. If you cannot sit with boredom, you cannot access sustained focus. Training your brain means reclaiming your attention. It means setting boundaries around what you consume and when you consume it. It means understanding that every input, every piece of information, every distraction is shaping your neural pathways. Your physical state influences your mental state more than you might realize. Movement, for example, is not just about physical health. It directly impacts brain function. Exercise increases blood flow, enhances neuroplasticity, and improves mood through the release of specific neurotransmitters. Even brief bouts of movement can shift your state and improve your ability to focus. Nutrition also plays a role. The brain requires energy to function, and the quality of that energy matters. Stable blood glucose levels support consistent focus and performance, while spikes and crashes can lead to fatigue and decreased cognitive ability. Hydration, too, is critical. Even mild dehydration can impair attention and memory. These are not separate factors. They are part of a system. Your brain does not operate in isolation. It is influenced by your body, your environment, your habits, and your choices. Consistency is where most people struggle, not because they lack ability, but because they underestimate the importance of structure. The brain responds well to routine. When you perform the same actions at the same time each day, you reduce the need for decision-making. And decision-making consumes mental energy. By creating structure, you free up resources that can be directed toward performance. This is why rituals are powerful. A simple, repeatable sequence of actions before a task can signal to your brain that it is time to focus. Over time, this becomes automatic. You no longer rely on motivation. You rely on pattern. There will be resistance. There will be moments where your brain pushes back, where it seeks comfort, where it tries to pull you into old habits. This is not failure. This is the process. Resistance is a sign that you are operating at the edge of your current capacity. The key is not to eliminate resistance, but to move through it, to recognize it without obeying it, to understand that the feeling of I don't want to do this is not a command. It is a sensation, and sensations pass. When you begin to operate this way, you develop a different relationship with effort. Effort is no longer something to avoid. It becomes something you seek because you understand what it represents. It represents growth. It represents adaptation. It represents progress at the deepest level. You also begin to detach from immediate outcomes. You focus less on whether something works instantly and more on whether it is moving you in the right direction. This long-term orientation is critical. The brain changes slowly, but it changes reliably when given consistent input. Patience becomes a form of discipline. Not passive waiting, but active persistence. Continuing to act, to train, to show up, even when results are not immediately visible. And then, over time, something remarkable happens. The actions that once required effort begin to feel natural. The discipline that once felt forced becomes automatic. The identity you were building through repetition becomes your default state. You don't think about whether to act, you act. You don't debate whether to focus, you focus. The friction decreases because the neural pathways have been strengthened through repetition. This is the transformation. Not a sudden shift, but a gradual rewiring. A process of becoming through doing. You start to trust yourself. Not because you always feel confident, but because you have evidence. Evidence that you can follow through. Evidence that you can handle discomfort. Evidence that you can adapt and improve. And that trust changes everything. It changes how you approach challenges. It changes how you respond to setbacks. It changes how you see yourself, because at the core of it all, training your brain to win is not about external success. It is about internal alignment. It is about becoming someone whose thoughts, actions, and behaviors are consistent with growth and performance. Every day presents an opportunity to reinforce that alignment. Every choice, no matter how small, contributes to the direction you are moving in. You are either strengthening the patterns that hold you back or the patterns that move you forward. There is no neutral. The brain is always adapting, always updating, always learning from what you do. So you become intentional. You become deliberate. You recognize that the smallest actions, getting up when you said you would, focusing when it would be easier to drift, completing what you started, are not small at all. They are the building blocks of a different brain, a different identity, a different life. And once you see that clearly, once you feel the connection between your actions and your neural wiring, you no longer rely on chance. You take ownership of the process. You train with purpose. You move with clarity. You act with consistency because you understand that winning is not something you chase. It is something you build one deliberate action at a time, one repeated behavior at a time, one moment of choosing growth over comfort again and again and again